Emma Hartford sat in the leather chair of Attorney Morrison's downtown office, her fingers trembling as she held the document that would alter her life forever. At 23 years old, she had been scraping by as a paralegal while finishing her law degree at night, living in a cramped studio apartment and surviving on instant noodles more often than she cared to admit. Her father, Robert Hartford, had passed away 2 months earlier, and she had assumed there would be little left after his medical bills. She was wrong. Attorney Morrison cleared his throat, his weathered face showing sympathy as he watched her process the information. He had known Robert Hartford for over 30 years and had tried to convince his old friend to reconsider this unusual clause, but Robert had been adamant. "Your father left an estate worth $3.5 million, Morrison said gently. "However, there is a condition attached to your inheritance." Emma looked up, her green eyes wide with confusion. "What kind of condition?" "You must marry Judge Theodore Blackwell within 6 months of your 24th birthday. If you refuse, or if Judge Blackwell declines, the entire estate will be donated to various charitable organizations." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Emma felt the room spin slightly as she tried to comprehend what she had just heard. "Judge Theodore Blackwell? I don't even know who that is." Morrison pulled out a folder containing newspaper clippings and photographs. "He's one of the most respected federal judges in the country. Your father mentored him when he was fresh out of law school, essentially gave him his start in the legal profession. Your father considered him like a son." Emma studied the photographs. Theodore Blackwell was imposing, probably in his late 30s, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples, sharp features, and intense eyes that seemed to look right through the camera lens. He was devastatingly handsome in a severe, untouchable way. Every photo showed him in formal attire, usually entering or leaving courthouses, always alone, always with that same serious expression. "Why would my father do this?" Emma whispered, more to herself than to Morrison. "He left you a letter." Morrison handed her an envelope with her name written in her father's familiar handwriting. Emma's hands shook as she opened it. Her father's words blurred through her tears as she read his explanation. He wrote about how Theodore had been a lost young man, brilliant but directionless, until Robert had taken him under his wing. He wrote about how Theodore had never had a real family, never learned to open his heart to anyone. And he wrote about how he believed Emma and Theodore could save each other from lives of loneliness. "This is insane," Emma said, wiping her eyes. "You can't just arrange marriages in the 21st century." "Your father was very specific in his wishes," Morrison replied. "He believed Judge Blackwell would take care of you, protect you in ways he no longer could." Emma thought about her mounting student loans, her landlord who had just raised the rent again, the part-time job that barely covered her expenses. $3.5 million would change everything. But marrying a complete stranger? "Has Judge Blackwell been informed of this?" she asked. "Not yet. That decision is yours to make. If you want to proceed, I will contact his legal representation with the proposal." Emma spent the next week in agonizing deliberation. She researched everything she could find about Theodore Blackwell. He was brilliant, graduating top of his class from Yale Law School. He had served as a federal judge for over a decade, known for his fairness but also his severity. There were no scandals, no rumors, no personal life whatsoever. He seemed to exist only for his work. Finally, driven by a combination of desperation and curiosity, Emma called Morrison. "Contact Judge Blackwell. Tell him I'm willing to proceed if he agrees." The response came faster than she expected. 3 days later, Morrison called to say that Theodore had agreed to meet with her. The meeting took place in a private conference room at Morrison's office. Emma arrived 15 minutes early, wearing her best dress, a simple navy blue sheath that she had bought for job interviews. She was a bundle of nerves, constantly smoothing her light brown hair and checking her reflection in the window. When Theodore Blackwell walked in, the room seemed to shrink. He was taller than she had imagined, at least 6'3", with broad shoulders and a presence that commanded immediate attention. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, and those intense dark eyes from the photographs fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Miss Hartford," he said, his voice deep and measured. He extended his hand. "Judge Blackwell," Emma replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but not crushing, his skin warm against hers. She felt a strange electricity at the contact. "Please, call me Theodore. If we're going to be married, formality seems unnecessary." They sat across from each other at the conference table. For a long moment, neither spoke. Theodore studied her with the same careful attention he probably gave to complex legal briefs. Emma met his gaze, refusing to be intimidated despite her racing heart. "Your father saved my life," Theodore finally said, his voice softer than before. "I was angry, arrogant, convinced the world owed me something because I had lost my parents young. Robert Hartford saw past all that anger. He gave me a purpose, taught me what it meant to serve justice rather than just chase success." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "He never mentioned you to me. I didn't know you existed until a week ago." "We lost touch over the years," Theodore admitted. "I regret that deeply. When Morrison contacted me about the will, I was shocked. But I also understood immediately why Robert did this." "Why?" Emma asked. Theodore looked away for the first time, vulnerability flickering across his features. "Because we're both alone. Both too focused on survival to actually live. He wanted better for us. So you'll do it? You'll marry me to fulfill his wishes?" "I'll do it because I owe your father everything I am," Theodore said, his eyes meeting hers again. "And because I think he was right. We could help each other." "This would be purely practical," Emma said quickly. "A business arrangement. I'm not expecting anything romantic." Something unreadable crossed Theodore's face. "Of course. We'll maintain separate lives under the same roof. You'll have complete freedom and financial security. In return, we honor your father's memory by at least trying to fulfill his wishes." They agreed to marry within the month. The ceremony was brief and cold, held at City Hall with only Morrison and his assistant as witnesses. Theodore wore a black suit. Emma wore a simple white dress she had found at a consignment shop. When the officiant asked Theodore to kiss his bride, he merely brushed his lips against her cheek, so quickly she barely felt it. Afterward, Theodore drove her to his home, a massive colonial estate about 30 miles outside the city. Emma stared in awe at the mansion as they pulled up the long driveway. It was 3 stories of pristine white stone, surrounded by manicured gardens and towering oak trees. "This is where you live?" she breathed. "Where we live now," Theodore corrected, but his voice was distant. "Mrs. Patterson, the housekeeper, has prepared the guest wing for you. The east side of the house. I use the west wing. We shouldn't disturb each other." The words stung more than Emma had expected. As Mrs. Patterson, a kind-faced woman in her 60s, showed Emma to her rooms, she fought against the hollow feeling in her chest. The suite was beautiful, with a 4-poster bed, an attached bathroom with a soaking tub, and windows overlooking the gardens. But it felt empty, impersonal. That night, Emma lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering what she had done. Somewhere in the West Wing, Theodore was probably working, already having forgotten about his new wife. She had security now, but she had never felt more alone. For the next 2 weeks, they barely saw each other. Theodore left for the courthouse before dawn and returned after Emma had gone to bed. They were strangers living under the same roof, bound by a legal contract and a dead man's wishes, but separated by walls neither knew how to breach. Emma had established a routine in the vast emptiness of the Blackwell estate. She studied in the library during the day, took long walks through the gardens, and ate dinner alone in the formal dining room while Mrs. Patterson fussed over her like a concerned mother. Theodore remained a ghost in her life, present only in the faint sounds of his car leaving early and returning late. 3 weeks into their arrangement, everything changed because of a dog. Emma was walking the perimeter of the property when she heard whimpering coming from near the stone wall that bordered the estate. Pushing aside some overgrown bushes, she found a small golden retriever puppy, no more than 3 months old, shivering and covered in mud. Its paw was caught in some old wire fencing. "Oh, you poor thing," Emma murmured, carefully freeing the puppy. It whimpered but didn't try to bite as she cradled it against her chest. "Let's get you cleaned up." She was in the kitchen, gently washing the puppy in the sink, when Theodore walked in. For the first time since their wedding, he had come home before midnight. He stopped in the doorway, briefcase still in hand, staring at the scene before him. Emma looked up, water dripping from her hands, the puppy squirming happily in the sink. Her hair was falling out of its ponytail, her shirt was soaked, and she had never looked more alive. "I found him trapped by the east wall," she explained quickly, expecting Theodore to be angry. "He's hurt and scared. I couldn't leave him there." Theodore set down his briefcase and walked closer, his eyes on the puppy rather than Emma. "He needs a veterinarian. That paw looks infected." "I know, but it's almost 9 o'clock. I wasn't sure where to take him." "I know an emergency vet clinic," Theodore said, surprising her. "Let me get a towel." He returned with a plush towel and carefully lifted the puppy from the sink. Emma watched as his stern expression softened while he dried the small animal. The puppy licked his hand, and for the first time since she had met him, Emma saw Theodore smile. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger and infinitely more approachable. They drove to the clinic together, their first real time alone since the wedding. The puppy sat in Emma's lap, occasionally whimpering. Theodore kept glancing over, his hand twitching as if he wanted to reach out and comfort either Emma or the dog, but couldn't quite make himself do it. "I had a dog when I was a kid," Theodore said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Before my parents died. A golden retriever, actually. His name was Max." Emma looked at him, seeing vulnerability in his profile as he drove. "What happened to him?" "He went to live with my aunt after the accident. She said she would take care of him, but I think she gave him away within a month. I never saw him again." The pain in his voice was raw, real. Emma understood then that Theodore's coldness was armor, built to protect himself from more loss. "We should keep this one," Emma said impulsively. "If he doesn't have an owner, he could stay with us." Theodore glanced at her, something warming in his dark eyes. "This is your home too, Emma. You don't need my permission for a pet." "I'm asking anyway." The smile returned, smaller this time but genuine. "Then yes. We'll keep him." At the clinic, the veterinarian confirmed that the puppy was a stray with no microchip. After treating the infected paw and giving them medication and care instructions, she sent them home with their new family member. "What should we name him?" Emma asked as they drove back to the estate. Theodore considered for a moment. "Justice. It seems appropriate for a judge's dog." Emma laughed, the first real laugh she had experienced since her father's death. "That's terrible and perfect at the same time." When they arrived home, instead of retreating to his wing, Theodore helped Emma set up a bed for Justice in a corner of the kitchen. They worked side by side, and Emma was acutely aware of every accidental brush of their hands, every shared glance over the puppy's head. "Thank you," Emma said softly as Justice settled into his new bed. "For helping with him. For agreeing to keep him." "He needed us," Theodore replied simply. Then, after a pause, "Maybe we needed him too." The next morning, Emma woke to find Theodore having breakfast in the kitchen for the first time. Justice was asleep at his feet, and Theodore was reading the newspaper with one hand while absently stroking the puppy with the other. "Good morning," Emma said, surprised. Theodore looked up. "Mrs. Patterson made enough for both of us. I thought we could eat together." It became their new routine. Breakfast together, taking turns checking on Justice throughout the day, dinner together in the evenings. They talked more, learned about each other beyond the basic facts. Emma discovered that Theodore loved classical music, that he had taught himself to play piano, that he secretly enjoyed terrible action movies. Theodore learned that Emma wanted to specialize in family law, that she loved old bookstores, that she sang off-key when she thought no one was listening. One evening, as Emma struggled with a particularly complex case study for her constitutional law class, Theodore found her in the library surrounded by books and looking frustrated. "Problem?" he asked, Justice trotting beside him. "I can't wrap my head around this precedent analysis," Emma admitted. "I've read it 5 times and it still doesn't make sense." Theodore sat down beside her on the sofa, closer than he had ever sat before. "Let me see." For the next hour, he walked her through the case, explaining the nuances with patience and clarity. Emma found herself leaning into him, drawn by both his intellect and the warmth of his presence. When she finally understood the concept, she turned to thank him and found their faces inches apart. The air between them crackled with sudden tension. Theodore's eyes dropped to her lips, and Emma felt her breath catch. For a moment, she thought he would kiss her. Instead, he pulled back abruptly. "You should get that now," he said, his voice rough. "I have work to finish." He left quickly, and Emma sat alone feeling confused and rejected. Justice whimpered and climbed into her lap, offering wordless comfort. The study sessions continued, but there was now an undercurrent of tension neither acknowledged. Emma caught Theodore watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. Theodore seemed hyper-aware of every movement Emma made, every time she tucked her hair behind her ear or bit her lip in concentration. 2 weeks before her final exams, Emma's classmate Derek invited her to a study group gathering at a local cafe. She hadn't socialized with anyone her age since the wedding, and the loneliness had been building. Without thinking about how it might look, she agreed. The study session evolved into dinner, and Emma found herself laughing and relaxing for the first time in weeks. Derek was charming and funny, and while she felt no romantic interest in him, the attention was a balm to her wounded ego after Theodore's rejection. What Emma didn't know was that Derek had posted a photo to social media, tagging her in it. Theodore, who had created a secret account just to follow Emma's life from a distance, saw it immediately. The photo showed Emma laughing, her head tilted back, joy radiating from her face. Derek's arm was casually draped over the back of her chair. The caption read, "Study group turns into the best night. Some people make everything better." Theodore stared at the photo, something dark and possessive unfurling in his chest. He had spent weeks trying to maintain distance, trying to honor the boundaries of their arrangement even as his feelings for Emma grew stronger every day. But seeing her with another man, seeing her laugh like that, shattered his carefully maintained control. He was waiting in the entrance hall when Emma came home at 10 o'clock. She was still smiling as she walked through the door, but her expression froze when she saw Theodore standing there, his face like carved stone. "Did you have a nice evening?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "I was at a study group," Emma said, confused by his tone. "Is something wrong?" A study group that apparently included dinner and cozy photographs. Emma's confusion turned to anger. "Are you monitoring my social media? Are you checking up on me?" "I saw the post," Theodore admitted, not bothering to deny it. "Derek seemed very comfortable with you." "He's a friend. We're in the same class." "What exactly are you accusing me of?" Theodore moved closer, and Emma could see the tension in every line of his body. "I'm not accusing you of anything. I just want to know if this arrangement is still what you want, or if you'd prefer to pursue other options." "Other options?" Emma's voice rose. "You've barely spoken to me for weeks except during our study sessions. You run away every time we have a moment of connection. And now you're angry because I had dinner with a classmate?" "I'm angry because I saw you smiling at another man the way I wish you would smile at me," Theodore said, the words erupting from him before he could stop them. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Emma stared at him, her heart pounding. "You wish I would smile at you," she repeated slowly. "Theodore, you pulled away from me. You made it clear this was just an arrangement, nothing more." "I was trying to protect you," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "From myself. From this." He gestured between them. "I've never had this before, Emma. I don't know how to be close to someone without ruining it." Emma took a step toward him, then another, until she was close enough to touch him. "What if I want to risk it? What if this arrangement stopped being just practical for me weeks ago?" Theodore looked at her with such intensity that she felt scorched. "When?" "The first morning you joined me for breakfast. Maybe even before that, when you smiled at justice for the first time. I've been falling for you slowly, Theodore, and it terrifies me because I don't think you feel the same way." "Don't feel the same way?" Theodore's laugh was harsh. "Emma, I think about you constantly. When I'm at work, I'm counting the hours until I can come home to you. When I see you studying in the library, I have to physically restrain myself from touching you. You've become the center of my entire world, and I have no idea what to do about it." Emma reached up and cupped his face with her hands, feeling him tremble at her touch. "Kiss me. That's what you do about it." Theodore's control finally shattered. He pulled her against him and kissed her with weeks of pent-up longing and frustration. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate, claiming, a kiss that said everything they had been too afraid to admit. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Emma whispered, "Don't ever pull away from me again." "Never," Theodore promised, resting his forehead against hers. "I'm done pretending this is just an arrangement. You're my wife, Emma. For real. If you'll have me." "I already have you," she said, pulling him down for another kiss. The next few days were a revelation. Theodore stopped retreating to his wing, instead spending every possible moment with Emma. They studied together, ate together, took justice for long walks around the property together. And they touched constantly, as if making up for lost time. A hand on the small of her back, fingers intertwined, his arm around her shoulders on the sofa. A week later, Theodore's law firm held their annual gala. For the first time in his career, Theodore brought a date. Emma wore a deep emerald gown that Theodore had insisted on buying for her, and when she descended the stairs, the look on his face made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. At the gala, Theodore kept Emma close to his side, introducing her as "my wife" with unmistakable pride. When they danced, he held her like she was precious and irreplaceable, his eyes never leaving hers. "Everyone's staring at us," Emma whispered. "Let them stare," Theodore replied. "I want everyone to know you're mine." "Possessive," Emma teased. "Completely," he agreed without shame. "Is that a problem?" Emma smiled up at him, her heart full. "Not even a little bit." When they returned home that night, everything had shifted. The pretense was gone, the walls demolished. They were no longer strangers fulfilling an obligation. They were Theodore and Emma, husband and wife, standing on the precipice of something real and terrifying and beautiful. "Stay with me tonight," Theodore said as they reached the hallway where their paths usually diverged. "Not in the guest wing. In my room. With me." Emma took his hand, her answer clear in her eyes. "I thought you'd never ask." Theodore's bedroom was a reflection of the man himself, elegant but understated, with dark wood furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the moonlit gardens. Emma had never been in this part of the house, and she looked around with curiosity even as her heart hammered in her chest. "Are you nervous?" Theodore asked softly, standing behind her. "A little," Emma admitted. "Are you?" Theodore turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Terrified." The honesty in his voice made Emma look up sharply. In the soft lamplight, she could see vulnerability written across his features, along with something else. Desire, certainly, but also uncertainty. "Theodore," she said gently, beginning to understand. "Have you ever done this before?" He looked away, color rising in his cheeks. For a powerful federal judge who commanded courtrooms with ease, he suddenly looked endearingly young and uncertain. "I've dedicated my entire life to my career," he said quietly. "There were a few dates in law school, nothing serious. After I became a judge, I told myself relationships were a distraction I couldn't afford. The truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of losing someone else I cared about." He met her eyes again. "So no. I haven't. Is that going to change how you feel about me?" Emma's heart melted completely. She reached up and kissed him softly. "It makes me love you more. Because you're trusting me with something precious. We'll figure this out together. There's no rush, no pressure. Just us." Theodore exhaled shakily, pulling her closer. "I love you, Emma Hartford Blackwell. I should have told you weeks ago." "I love you too," Emma whispered against his lips. "So much it scares me sometimes." What followed was tender and unhurried. They undressed each other slowly, exploring and learning. Theodore's hands trembled slightly as he touched her, reverent and careful. Emma guided him patiently, showing him what she liked, encouraging him with soft sounds and whispered words. "Like this?" Theodore murmured, his lips against her neck. "Perfect," Emma breathed, arching into his touch. When they finally came together, it was with a sense of rightness that transcended the physical. Theodore moved slowly at first, watching her face intently, making sure every moment brought pleasure rather than pain. Emma had never felt so cherished, so completely seen and valued. "Emma," Theodore whispered, his voice breaking with emotion as they moved together. "You're everything. Everything I didn't know I needed." "So are you," she managed, pulling him closer. "So are you." Afterward, they lay tangled together, Theodore's head resting on Emma's chest as she ran her fingers through his hair. Justice had somehow made his way into the room and was sleeping at the foot of the bed, completing their little family. "I can't believe I almost let my fear keep me from this," Theodore said quietly. "From you." "But you didn't," Emma reminded him. "You took the risk." "We both did." Theodore lifted his head to look at her, his dark eyes soft in the moonlight streaming through the windows. "Your father knew. Somehow he knew that we would be perfect for each other. That we would save each other from our loneliness. He always was wise like that," Emma said with a sad smile. "I wish he could see us now. See that his plan worked." "I think he can," Theodore said. "And I think he's glad we found our way to each other." They made love again as the sun began to rise, slower and more confident this time. Theodore was a quick learner, attentive and passionate, and Emma discovered that a man who approached everything with intensity and focus brought those same qualities to intimacy. By the time they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, both were thoroughly satisfied and deeply in love. Emma woke late the next morning to find Theodore propped up on one elbow, watching her sleep. "That's not creepy at all," she teased, stretching languorously. "I'm memorizing this moment," Theodore said seriously. "The first morning I wake up with my wife in my arms, knowing that this is real. That you're really mine." "And you're really mine," Emma countered, pulling him down for a kiss. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened in every way. Theodore rearranged his schedule to spend more time at home. Emma moved all her belongings into his room, officially abandoning the guest wing. They became inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and communicating with glances across rooms. Emma's final exams came and went. She passed with honors, and Theodore threw her a surprise party, inviting Mrs. Patterson and Attorney Morrison to celebrate. As Emma looked around at the small gathering in their home, she felt overwhelming gratitude for the strange journey that had brought her here. What are you thinking about? Theodore asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. About how 6 months ago, I thought this marriage would be the loneliest thing I ever experienced. And now I can't imagine my life without you in it. Theodore turned her in his arms, his expression serious. I want to do this right, Emma. Our wedding was cold and practical. I want to give you something better. What do you mean? Marry me again, Theodore said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a stunning diamond ring, the setting vintage and romantic. For real this time. Not because of your father's will or an obligation. But because I love you and I want everyone to know that I chose you and you chose me. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the ring, then at Theodore's hopeful face. We're already married, she pointed out through her tears. Legally, yes. But I want vows that mean something. A celebration of what we've built together. Will you marry me again, Emma? Will you let me stand in front of our friends and family and tell the world that you're the best thing that ever happened to me? Yes, Emma said, laughing and crying at once. Yes, absolutely yes. Theodore slipped the ring onto her finger, next to her simple wedding band, and kissed her deeply. Mrs. Patterson and Morrison applauded, both wiping away their own tears. 3 months later, they held a small ceremony in the gardens of the estate. Emma wore a flowing white dress, simple but elegant. Theodore wore a dark suit and couldn't stop smiling. Their vows, written by themselves, spoke of unexpected love, second chances, and gratitude for a father's wisdom. I promise to always come home to you, Theodore said, his voice thick with emotion. To never let my work be more important than us. To protect your heart as fiercely as you've protected mine. I promise to be your partner in everything, Emma replied, tears streaming down her face. To remind you to smile, to fill our home with love and laughter, to never let you forget how extraordinary you are. When they kissed as husband and wife for the second time, it was nothing like their first wedding. This kiss was joyful and passionate, witnessed by people who truly cared about them and celebrated their love. The reception was held under string lights in the garden, with music and dancing and genuine happiness. Emma danced with Theodore under the stars, justice running around their feet, and felt a contentment so complete it almost hurt. What are you thinking about now? Theodore asked, echoing his question from months before. I'm thinking that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, Emma said. I thought my father's will was a burden. But it was actually the greatest gift he could have given me. It brought me you. He gave us both a gift, Theodore agreed. He taught me that it's okay to open my heart. That love doesn't always end in loss. That sometimes the greatest risk brings the greatest reward. A year after their second wedding, Emma graduated from law school and accepted a position at a family law firm specializing in adoption cases. Theodore scaled back his hours to spend more time at home. They talked about children, about the future, about growing old together in the house that had once felt like a mausoleum but now overflowed with love. On the anniversary of Robert Hartford's death, they visited his grave together, bringing flowers and gratitude. Thank you, Emma whispered, kneeling beside the headstone. Thank you for knowing what I needed before I knew it myself. Thank you for giving me Theodore. Theodore placed his hand on her shoulder, his own silent thanks echoing through his mind. Robert Hartford had seen past his cold exterior to the lonely man underneath. He had given Theodore not just a career, but a family. A home. A reason to live beyond his work. As they walked back to their car, hand in hand, Justice trotting beside them, Emma looked up at Theodore. Do you ever wonder what our life would have been like if we had never met? If my father hadn't made that clause? Theodore pulled her closer, kissing her temple. I try not to. Because imagining a life without you in it is the only thing that still terrifies me. You'll never have to imagine it, Emma promised. I'm yours, Theodore Blackwell. For as long as you'll have me. Forever, then, Theodore said simply. Because forever is the only length of time that seems adequate when it comes to loving you. They drove home together, to the estate that represented not an obligation fulfilled but a love discovered. Justice slept in the back seat, and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. And in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The arranged marriage had become a love story. The lonely judge had found his heart. And the struggling student had discovered that sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money, but the chance to find true love in the most unexpected of places. Their story proved that some arrangements are written in the stars, that some fathers know their children better than the children know themselves, and that the greatest love stories often begin with the simplest word, yes.